Okay, Cheryl, so you wanted to paint some butterflies, and that makes me really excited because I've sure enjoyed painting butterflies lately. And in order to paint butterflies, the first thing I had to do is to look up butterflies so that I became a little more acquainted with them. So I went to Pinterest and I pulled up a bunch of butterflies, and what I found about butterflies are that they actually come in a huge variety of color. Almost you can even make up your color. They're just so unique, with such brilliant colors or muted colors or dots or spots or stripes. So they're just varied incredibly in their colors, also in their shapes. And I don't know what the difference between a butterfly and a moth is. I'm thinking that it's the body kind of differentiated, and I somewhere in the back of my mind I think that moths have a hairy body, but I don't know for sure about that. But anyway, I'm really happy to try to do some butterflies here, and after looking at them and as I've been painting them, again, I mentioned that they're just so diversified, and some of the ways that I've enjoyed painting them are with the dry paper and the wet paint, and then also with adding the water first and then adding the color, and then they kind of bleed in to each other and their colors. And I don't know if I'm successful at either of those, but I sure have enjoyed painting them. And so let's just go ahead, and I've got a timer on. I don't want us to go too long, but I did kind of with my Pinterest here, I've got a couple that maybe will follow. Oh, darn it. Maybe we'll follow their color patterns, and maybe not. The other thing I noticed are the wing shapes are completely different. Some of the wing shapes, the wings come up above the head and are very large. And then the second wing comes in almost where the first wing starts, and others, the first wing and let's go back to the second wing. The second wing sometimes is longer than the first wing, and other times the first wing is way up here large, and then the bottom wing is a little smaller. It appears that the bottom wing actually attaches kind of up on the body, but oftentimes the wings are alongside the body, so you don't see that. But here you'll see the body, and then the wings are attached up further. And here you're going to see it from the side, and the same thing here. So let's just go ahead. I've got a little bigger brush, and I'm adding water to it, and I'm just going to bring the water on the leaf here. And darn it, my ink is bleeding, which it should not be doing, but for some reason sometimes it does, and that just frustrates me. But let's go ahead and move on. So I've got water on here, and I'm going to mop some of it up because it looks like there's maybe more than I want. And I'm just going to add a little bit of orange and let it go ahead and bleed in. And it's not wanting to a lot right here, but let's help it a little bit. Then we can come back in and just let's let it do that for a minute. While that one dries, let's come back and do, actually, this one would be a great one to bleed in because it was almost one color. And then it was a very variegated, but one color. So I'm gonna add some color, and maybe we can add a little bit of variety as we go along. So I've added a little bit of pattern on one side of the leaf just to kind of help me, because time-wise, if I started to put in the patterns and get all the details, we are just gonna totally run out of time. But what you're gonna find is this is super fun. Butterflies are incredibly cheerful to me. They just make me happy to look at. their patterns and flight patterns and their diversity and all of it is just such a cheerful element. And I found as I paint them and put them on flowers that they just kind of enliven the picture. One thing I like to do, now I usually don't do pencil first, and I'll just use my pen, and that's just because I've painted for so long. I'm able to kind of make my hand do what my eye sees, but you might want to put pencil first and then go back in with the pen. But what I want to mention about that is if you move fast on the watercolor, on the butterflies, it just makes a better line and more of a grace to it. And especially as you're putting these little feelers on, it's just so nice to move your pen or pencil so quick, and it just ends up with lovely arches or little curves to it that looks so natural. That's the same thing with the wings, is if you're moving fast and getting your shape, and your shape isn't always perfect, and that doesn't matter because butterflies are so diverse. Perfect is imperfect. You just, again, get such a graceful wing. See, if I'm doing it fast, I can end up with what I want, and it can just look quite graceful. If I slow it down, it just looks a little more contrived, is what I'm kind of trying to express. But it's okay to do it with pencil first and then follow with pen. But keep in mind that if you move your pen quickly, you're going to end up with a more graceful line, I feel like. I'm going to come back in here. Actually, that's not the blue. I want to come back in with a brighter blue. It's starting to dry just a little bit. Oh, see, isn't that lovely? How it's just bleeding out into the wing there. And this side isn't wet enough to give us that little look, but you can kind of see the difference actually. From the one side, this one's wetter and bleeding out, and this one I had to add the color. Now this one here, we may have gotten a little too dry so that we're not going to get to have it move out. Oh, nope, it's still wet, so isn't that lovely? We can just kind of bring it in a little darker here in the center and let it fade out into the wing a little bit. I don't remember what colors this one had on it. Oh, but we can fade it in. Let's do a little bit. So let's come over to this guy. I'm going to get it a little bit wet. I've got a little bit of design on here, but not on all the wings. Let's bring him in. That's a beautiful yellow. So I didn't put flowers on these so much. These aren't lit on flowers because I wanted the butterflies to stand out, but I certainly would add flowers to them because I think that is so charming. So we're going to let that one dry just a little bit. And he is on my wrong side, so I'm going to move him so that he can dry over here. I'm splashing a little bit on this card. And this is bled out into his body, and that is just okay with watercolor. But I'm deciding I'm going to come back in and give the body a little bit more of its color here. The thing I've noticed is you can actually see a little eye on some of these butterflies. I never really draw it in, but you actually can see an eye on them. I'm going to just decide, I think I'm going to bring in just another little color here, just to see if we can get it bleeding in, just to, oh man, some of them are just so delicate. And pretty. We're going to come, oh no, that's not going to be dark enough. We're going to come darker on the edges so that the little dots will show up a little more. And in watercolor, you don't really get to add white after, so your white has to be there before your colors come in, and so that's where the pattern is on there, so that those can be little white dots. And I didn't put them up further, so they can't be there. And sometimes I'll come along and follow the wing with a fine little point after. And I don't have the dots on there, but I'll come back in and put them in. Help that to kind of bleed in there. Let's go to this guy and let's give him some brighter in the little shapes, a little more intense color. And some of that, I like to give a variation also of color. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of yellow here, or a lighter orange. Look there. I think I'd probably want to take up a little bit of this more intense orange. Give it a little yellow. So one of the hard things is that it really takes some patience to let the paper dry, and then to be able to add your other color. So I'm gonna speed that up with the hot heat gun here. None of it is really dry enough to keep working with. I'm going to come back in and see if I can't just outline my wings just a little bit. Kind of highlight them. Well, that's the... I kind of set that so that this wouldn't go too long, and we have barely started here. You can really get really detailed with them, and then it ends up that it's quite time consuming. And so with the detail, maybe just with that said, maybe I don't need to show you all the detail, but you can see I'm kind of adding a contrast to help those the colors show up a little bit. It's still awfully wet in there by the body, so it's bleeding in. I want it to come back here and add some of these little dots that are going to be, I think I'm going to leave them white, but it's too wet right now to do that. Let's see if we can just add a little bit more of the blue. Just come in between these shapes here. And I have found that that's what, you know, sometimes when you get into detail work, or when I get into detail work, I get a little tight in my painting. I'm not always a fan of that, but I found to help it so that it doesn't look quite as tight is to bring in, if I'm using a blue, bring in several blues so that there's a kind of a look like it's fading in from one to another and not just color but colored. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're getting a little more detailed there, and that's about as far probably as we're going to get detailed. Let me just come back here. I love, the other thing I love about these butterflies are their fabulous long legs, and if you've got them on a flower, then they're very noticeable. If they're flying or sitting on, you're looking at them sitting on a flower from the top, you don't notice those beautiful legs, but man, they're very graceful looking. One thing that I'm just adding, see, he's kind of sitting on something, so I'm giving it a little color. The other thing I've noticed in starting to notice butterflies is sometimes they'll sit on a flower and the flower will be a similar color to what they are, and there's very much a camouflage look even. They blend right in. And then the other beauty is a butterfly that is nothing like the flower it lands on. Just stands out so stark and gorgeous because it isn't the same colors. So Cheryl, how are we doing here? Is that helping just a little bit? We can kind of come back to this guy. He's a little more dry. So again, I would come back and I would try to bring in a little variegated color. And then I would highlight the wing shape with whatever color that I decide, but usually it's a little different color than what his complete body is. I love these wings on this one. Sometimes you'll have scalloped wings, and that's just so beautiful, and sometimes just the grace and arch of the wings make them beautiful without the scallops. I love these little tails. I don't know another term for them. It's so interesting when you start watching. Sometimes the butterflies have two of these little tails on them. They are just so fun and so diversified. Just enjoy looking at them, and then the more you look at them, the more then your hand is going to be able to paint what you see, so long as you are noticing what you're seeing. So we're going to sign these like always, and then I hope, please get back with me if this isn't what you were looking for, or if there's more that you want to watch and see, you know, have me paint again. Let me know, and I'll work through it again. Have fun painting butterflies, Cheryl. Thanks for asking. Bye-bye.